I know that you want to hear about commitments from federal parties on infrastructure and bridge building and highways and affordable housing commitments. And you've been quite vocal that you're sick and tired of hearing about niqabs at citizenship ceremonies and barbaric cultural practices tip lines. I'm going to ask you to get political here, and you can decline if you like, but who do you like what you're seeing from?
Well, it's really not appropriate for the mayor to express a partisan preference, and I don't have one. I'm not a member of a political party.
Because you got to work with whoever's the PM.
Well, it's not just that, but I mean, I think what my role is and how I've tried to operate through the provincial election and through this election is not to get personal with people and not to pick teams, but to talk about policy. And if we want to talk about policy with respect to the dignified treatment of women, I think we should also be giving airtime to the plight of Aboriginal women in this country who are extraordinarily overrepresented among those who become missing and murdered. We should be talking about the crisis of domestic violence that we see rising around us. We should be talking about the need for childcare to be able to assist women in lone parent families, which are overwhelmingly headed by women, to get the support that they need either to go back to school or to re-engage in the labor force, and for their kids to be successful and supported with nutrition and literacy and all those things. I mean, if we want to talk about women's issues, let's talk about all of them.
Is Edmonton doing a good enough job with what we can control within our own municipal boundaries when it comes to women's issues?
I think there's more work to do, but we held the Women's Symposium last weekend, and Councillor Bev Esslinger and I are the lead council members on our women's initiative, and we've formed a women's advisory group, a Women's Advocacy Voice of Edmonton, we call it. It's an advisory group to council of women from different backgrounds who have already helped us in areas like our new campaign around essentially prohibiting or certainly taking a very dim view of sexual harassment and sexual assault on our transit system. And that push was really led by this women's advocacy group that we've created in the city. So we've empowered women to come together and provide that kind of policy advice to council, and we're also working around with many partners from the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters to the Edmonton Eskimos on combating gender-based violence, which is not exclusively but is overwhelmingly, we call it violence against women, and we often leave out the fact that it is overwhelmingly violence by men against women. And so whether it's the advocacy group Men Edmonton, which has started up, which is young men who are extraordinary leaders who are using social media and events to raise awareness and talk about the inappropriateness.
Is this that 100 Men group that we hear about?
No, it's a different one. But there's so many of these different groups who are trying to work on this. The city's just trying to keep in touch with everybody and support them and do our kind of classic community development work. So to the extent that the city, we can't change some of the big policy levers that are in the hands of provincial and federal governments around things like childcare, for example. But what we can do is support grassroots initiatives, and there are so many of them happening in our city right now that I think we can look to with some pride.